Here are some of the amazing character art from the game Guilty Gear Strive. Currently, do as mine. I want to take my art from this to this in just 7 days. Get your popcorn and lock in, because this was not easy. But first, who am I, you might be wondering? I've been drawing for a couple months at this point, but I didn't have a ton of direction throughout that time. I started off with traditional art, pencils, and ink pens, though I did eventually buy a relatively cheap drawing tablet, and I love digital art. It immediately ignited that spark I had when I started making art, though I would always avoid anime painting, mainly because of self-doubt. I would see others make beautifully dynamic art, such as Mai Yaniyama, and the art from one of my favorite creators, Mark Brunette. And obviously this level was way out of reach for 7 days, though I still got way farther in the end than I ever thought was possible when I started this challenge. Something about the Guilty Gear art just enticed me so much. I didn't know if it was the character designs, the outfits, the color palettes, the dynamic poses, character silhouettes, lighting, personality, composition, line art, character eyes, legs. And while it was all of those things, there was one thing that stood out to me the most. The weapons. Guilty Gear has some of the coolest and most expressive weapons I've ever seen from a video game. But let's get back to the challenge. 7 days to go from never touching a digital painting a day in my life to a full-colored illustration with lighting, shading, and everything that else goes into making a complete piece. I was very inspired by the Guilty Gear art, and I forgot where, but I heard a quote once that your art is usually best when you are inspired. But this attempt clearly showed me it wasn't going to automatically equal skill, and it wasn't going to draw for me either. Let's address the elephant in the room before we dive in. My art had a lot of areas needing improvement, whether it was the hands, the eyes, the face, but overall, the pose was just so stiff. While on the other hand, the Guilty Gear art looked like it could just walk right out of the frame, and yeah, mine definitely did not. Mine looked like one of those cheap plastic cardboard cutouts that just falls over all the time. Originally, I was thinking about making this challenge a month long, but I ended up shortening that all the way down to a week because I just got tired of pushing off and postponing anime painting that I had wanted to start so long ago. But I also knew because of this, those 7 days were going to be intense. And it certainly was. There was struggles, setbacks, and the occasional wins, but I do believe that anyone else could follow a similar thing I'm doing over these days to be well on their way to creating their first illustration. Things first, I needed a plan, or I was just going to go back to drawing boxes, which I was way too familiar with. So without further ado, day 1. Basic head movement. Today was off to a pretty rough start as I was just spamming faces without any real direction, but I just wanted to get a baseline, and some of these kind of looked like I hadn't even drawn a day in my life. So I found that picture you see, and I tried to replicate it, the step-by-step process, but I didn't have much success. So I did end up moving to a different method with this other picture I found. And after today, it kind of felt like I was back to where I started and I didn't really make any progress. I did end up learning something valuable from today, which I'll get to in one moment. But at the end here, you can just see I'm trying to get better at tracing the sphere because that seemed like that was a pretty good baseline for all the methods. That was everything I had drawn by the end of day 1, and it was pretty embarrassing as I swear I knew what a good anime face looked like. My hand just couldn't replicate it. I did have some decent ones with the basis of the head construction, but the most valuable thing I learned today was before I could really get anywhere with this challenge, I was going to have to find one method and just stick with it and get really good at it. So that was my focus for day 2, improving on my head drawing, but with an actual method I can stick to. So here was the method, but first let's pause. I want to briefly explain this method that I'm doing because this might look like I'm just throwing a bunch of lines on a circle, though I truly believe that anyone else could replicate this exact method because it's way simpler than it looks. This method was created by my favorite manga artist, Akihiro Yoshitomi, and he does it in a way that was just so intuitive for me to understand. Start by drawing a circle and determining the head tilt, and then you draw lines that represent the front plane of the head, and then 2 diagonal lines connecting down to the chin, and draw a line where you want the eyes to be. Then you finish out the box, and then you draw a circle on the side plane of the head, because you'll be shaving that down. And then to end it off, you just draw the cheek and the jaw lines, and then you're done. The reason I liked this method so much was how it uses a box so you can better understand the different planes of the head, but instead of trying to make the head shape and then trying to figure out where the box goes around it, you actually make them at the same time. And right before I get back to the video, I just want to say thank you for getting this far. And this is my first time seriously editing a full video and recording it, so please leave me suggestions down below or where I can improve. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. Going forward, this method gave me the confidence that for the first time, I didn't just have to guess everything. I put a lot of attention to this step because people's attention is naturally focused on the face, as you can see from more of Mai's work. And so I knew that if I completely fail in the face, then nothing else was really going to matter. And there are a lot of areas you might be able to forgive, like if the hands look a little off, but if the face feels off, the whole piece feels off. As for the results of day 2, I was a lot happier at the end of this day than day 1, as instead of just trying a bunch of different methods, this one actually made me feel like I had a system in place. And though the heads were far from perfect, I actually felt like I made progress this day until I removed the guidelines. Once the guidelines disappeared, it sort of looked like day 1 again, and they just felt so lifeless, and so I knew I had to focus on that on day 3. Which was eyes and hair. Today was big, as I was actually going to give the lifeless heads up until this point emotion. So today I mainly studied eyes of different Guilty Gear characters, because this was my first time really diving into these. And I've really tried to push myself to get the angle of the eyes right, even when the face was turned, because if the face is turned and you draw eyes that look the exact same, obviously that looks way off. And I was really proud with how these eyes were turning out. And then after the eyes, I started looking up some hair tutorials, which you can see here. And the main method I used, which seemed pretty universal across all the different methods, was that you treat it as like these big folds of paper. And then after you have all the big paper folds, then you can start cutting it and dividing into it. Today was on the shorter end because I really just wanted to try to nail the eyes and the hair. And I think the studies helped a ton, especially the ones where I would first draw it like the reference, and then I would try to draw it from a different angle. And these heads were actually starting to feel like they had some life with them, and I was really proud at my first real shot of hair, especially the one in the middle at the bottom. Unfortunately, as you probably know, people tend to have more body parts than just a head, and over these last 3 days I really only focused on that, and I didn't have a clue on basic body proportions, so I knew I was going to have to focus on that for day 4. So here we were at day 4, basic anatomy, proportions, and posing. I started today off with just some super basic front-facing people to try to get that baseline understanding of proportions, and the method I was using here was something I picked up from Shiro Iro's channel, where you draw the action line going through the person, and then you make those tick marks that you see to help you guide yourself with your proportions. And I had tried learning anatomy months before without really any success, and I knew I couldn't learn everything there was to know about anatomy in just these couple of days, but I just wanted to get the overall proportions correct because I believed that that was going to make the biggest difference when it came down to the final illustration. And I knew I only had a couple days until that final illustration, which was pretty scary because I hadn't even touched color yet, and so I knew starting color tomorrow was definitely going to be a non-negotiable. I really tried to put everything that I learned so far together, and things were actually looking a lot better, especially compared to anything I was doing just a couple days ago. Overall, on day 4, I felt like everything was really coming together, which was great, but with no color and only a couple days left, I was gonna have to lock it. Finally, day 5, color, and learning how to draw clothes. I started today off with just some quick full body warm-ups, and then I tried to put clothes on the characters, but that was not turning out too hot, so I really tried to study the character Mei to to try to learn better how clothes wrapped around the body because I really wanted to capture that for the final. Color is coming soon, I promise. Here, I finally started adding some color, and I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I was just copying the references' exact colors, and drawing lines just was so intuitive, and it always felt like there was a correct answer. Though with color, the answers just felt so endless. I had never studied color theory, but I didn't want to just copy their colors for the rest of this challenge, so I decided to give myself a new rule. For the final illustration, I was not allowed to copy the colors, and I was going to have to come up with my own color scheme. I wanted a better system to drawing colors, so I watched some Mark Brunette videos, and that helped me figure out how to use different layer types such as multiply and different lighting layers, which I really tried to push in this blue color scheme. Speaking of blue, May has this dolphin attack that you can spam over and over again, but obviously I never spammed that when I was playing. Me? Of course not. I would never do that. Full coincidence, obviously, but that dolphin was probably the best thing I had drawn this whole challenge, and something that I noticed after making it, which was not on purpose, it had a lot of variation in line thickness, and I never paid attention to that, but I really wanted to push that on the final illustration. But with just one day left, the pressure was starting to build. And even though today was the last day before day 7, it was actually the shortest day, because I only had one goal in mind, and that was to get better at skin tones. May's legs were a big part of her design, as you can see, and skin tone is something that will pretty much help me for every illustration I ever make. So it was well worth giving it its own day. One problem I would run into is that the leg I gave shade would kind of look like it was from a different character because it would be a little too dark. And pretty much all I could think about at this point was that final illustration, so I just ended today with some fun line exercises, but I really tried to push the variance in line thicknesses as I wanted that in the final. Throughout this challenge, I noticed that everything I did was pretty much a study. I didn't really do any fully polished work besides that dolphin, and so I knew starting tomorrow, I was gonna actually have to make myself do a fully finished piece, and I couldn't treat it like another study. It felt like going into a boss fight, or an exam where you crammed in all the information the night before, and you didn't really know if you actually knew any of it, or you just thought you did. But this next day was gonna show me. It was gonna show me how much I truly learned from all my studies over these past 6 days. I felt like I had all the pieces, and now I just had to put them all together on day 7. The final illustration. The first step of day 7 was the pose and rough sketch. I knew I wanted the composition to be based off of her anchor and the dolphin, so this whole first step was really just me focusing on that. This was where we were looking at the end of the initial sketch, and now it was time to bring it to the next stage, which was line work and finalizing the pose. I started by drawing the head with the method that I had learned back in day 2, and I pretty much just worked my way down the illustration as I continued to try to push the line art and not have that stiff pose. And this step by far took the longest because the decisions here carried a lot more weight than the initial sketch because it was going to be hard to make big changes after I got farther into the line art. This was the finalized line art, and now there was just one more step, the color. I started off by making the base colors, and I decided to go with that blue color scheme that I tried drawing earlier on day 5. And at the end of the base colors, this is what we were looking like. And now there was just one thing left, the shadows and the rendering. And this last part was pretty quick. Now, it was done. This mini 7-day journey was finally at its end, and overall I was really happy with the final results. While it was far from perfect, I could really tell that I had learned so much over these past 6 days, and for the first time I could clearly see the gap between where I started just 7 days ago and where I was now. When I started this, I thought after the week was over I was just going to leave this hobby to the side, but honestly, 7 days wasn't enough. I could push farther. Where could I get in 30 days, or even 100 days? I was just going to have to keep grinding to see for myself, and I hope you guys will stick along with this journey, and maybe I inspired one of you guys to start your own. And although this drawing might not be ready for the wiki just yet, I still had so much fun, and I've already started my training for the 30-day video, so it would mean so much to me if you subscribe so you can see when that comes out, and please let me know what I can improve on for future videos. Thank you, see you next time, peace.